All right, welcome to the first of its kind, world-changing manufacturers network. Lisa Ryan has her ears to the ground and her heart in the game. Get ongoing education and new connections right here with Lisa and the Manufacturers Network. Buckle your seat, listen, and spread the word. Here's Lisa.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. Excited to introduce our guest today, Karim Khafuri. Karim is a global entrepreneur and president CEO of the Atlas Network, providing end-to-end supply chain solutions. He is also the founder of the Global Crosswalk and co-host of the Supply and Demand Show on YouTube with deep expertise in innovation, logistics, and business strategy. So, Karim, welcome to the show.
Lisa, thank you so much for having me. It's a great show, and I appreciate you having me as a guest today.
Awesome. Share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to doing what you do.
Sure. There's a lot of drivers that I think a person ending up at their final place. And I've always been an entrepreneur since a young age. I was always looking for unique ways to solve problems. And if I could do it along the way by providing a service or making a little bit of some money in the process, that was even the better, right? So you start with those lemonade stands and those selling shirts in the mall and doing some small marketing projects or mowing lawns or all those things that we do that teach us about entrepreneurship and getting a business going. And through time, I really continue to develop at least my global mindset because I grew up speaking French, Arabic, and English in my house. My parents were immigrants, came from overseas in the 70s, and we traveled a lot when I was a kid. I think my first plane was, maybe around 3 or 4 months old. And so being a global citizen and seeing this idea of the world at large and the global economy, meshing that with business and entrepreneurship set me on this pathway to, I think, in many ways, let me do what I do today successfully, which is being able to connect the dots in a global mindset, a global landscape for our customers. And as we go forward, I had different stints in the financial industry and in the technology space. But ultimately, I think what really led me to my final career path with the Atlas Network to really take a circumvented kind of route is I was working at the Securities and Exchange Commission in DC in the Office of International Affairs, and then moved over to NASD FINRA, where I did a lot of risk mitigation and control matrices around Sarbanes-Oxley. And the reason why this is important is because right around this time where I was doing all of that kind of work in the financial regulatory space, I took a trip to Asia. I had always been entrepreneurial, as I said, and I saw manufacturing, the process, the fascination with ideas into reality and how anything and everything could be produced. And at the same time, too, is when Alibaba was really coming on the scene and doing a great amount of work with their tech platform. But the number one complaints for overseas sourcing and procurement was, wow, when things go wrong, we have no recourse. And how do you pick the right supplier and so on and so forth? And Alibaba at the time was just focused on being a great tech platform, and it didn't have many of its great programs that it has today, trade assurance and verification and different things. So I said, wow, what an amazing opportunity. Somehow in my mind, the idea of risk mitigation and control processes and better protocols and manufacturing all kind of melded. And that was the beginnings of the Atlas Network, to basically help small, medium, large-sized businesses mass produce goods or source goods in the global marketplace safely and do it in accordance with strict protocols and tolerances and according to not just trying to sell on the lowest cost solution or making promises you could never really fulfill, but instead selling on the non-sexy stuff that keeps people up at night. And these words like disruption and efficiency and quality control, which many people's eyes would glaze over now in our current marketplace and environment, are the most important things that anybody cares about more than anything else. That was a very long-winded explanation to your question. I'm sorry I took a couple of minutes to do, but again, any entrepreneur doesn't really have a straight path, and neither did I. So.
Well, and it's interesting. And I know that I've heard of Alibaba, but number one, it's been a while, and I'm not really sure, like, how did they really change everything as far as, because it sounded like they had a pretty good role in making you change plans and doing what you do.
Yes. So essentially, Alibaba, we know, is one of the largest global marketplaces, trade marketplaces on the planet. They developed trade management and sort of trade communications tools to open up global manufacturing and sourcing to everyone in the world. Now, the issue came in the early days where you had a lot of bad actors. You had groups that would come onto the platform and say that they were a factory or a direct manufacturer, and they weren't. They were a trading
Hmm.
company or three steps removed, and they would put up some beautiful pictures and say, "Come to us. We'll give you the lowest cost, and we'll yes you to death." And you send money blindly. You never meet that group. And then that's where all the problems start because the first step is picking the right supplier. And there's a whole process to doing that I can discuss with you and we talk about. And many people would just get wowed by low prices and pretty pictures and not have a lot of due diligence behind that. And so what ended up, saving you 50 cents or a dollar gave you $5 or $10 in headaches, or maybe even destroyed your
Mm.
business in the end of the day. And you have no recourse and no kind of protections. That's changed significantly with Alibaba through the years. And I'm proud to say that we're the first US based verified supplier of Alibaba. We hold that
Okay.
title. And we do a lot with Alibaba. We are always speaking on stages and their co-create events. I've been to the Hangzhou headquarters. I know the management over there, and they have just made beautiful strides, leaps and bounds with amazing technology tools, great verification processes, trade assurance policies to allow people to take part in the global marketplace that they've built in a safe manner, in a truly safe manner. You can never weed out all the
Right.
bad players. You can never really ever do that, but just leaps and bounds above where it was in the very beginning stages.
Okay, thank you for that. So, as we're talking about these trends in global supply chain management, what are some of the ones that are most impacting manufacturers today? And then, how are you seeing that they can adapt to remain competitive?
It's a really good question, and a lot of people are trying to figure that one out. The reality of it is when you're dealing with global supply chain solutions and the global economy in general, is there are the tangible factors that you can try to control, and there are just the non-controllable factors that are so difficult to manage. What do I mean by that? A pandemic, a change in politics, wars, natural disasters, force majeure, global events that you could never really plan or work for. So, what do you really have to do? What do these businesses have to do to be resilient and be able to weather these storms? Is they have to essentially be nimble, they have to be adaptable. They have to have backup plans, backup plan B, C, D, E, and F. Because if you're operating in that global economy, and you don't own those manufacturing arms, then you need to be able to shift if you have to potentially other regions, other manufacturers, other countries. And you need to be able to really be able to pivot accordingly. It's just one of the risks of working in that space. Now, the benefits are is you get maybe the best access to the best output, resources, technology, and potentially costs on the planet when you open up your sourcing to the world. But again, against what level of potential risks? I write about that in my recent book, which is called Supply Chain Ups and Downs, where the first chapter, I literally say, get ready for a bumpy ride. That's exactly what it is in global
Hmm.
manufacturing and sourcing. And you're consistently looking at those factors that you can control and can't control. And so we're looking at a very unique environment today. President-elect Trump is coming in. He's trying to use some tactics regarding economic sanctions. And that's for some level of negotiation, maybe some level of saber rattling, or possibly going to fully come into play day one in the office. And so, how do these businesses operate accordingly? There's a lot of practices that they may have to look at. They may have to look at, can they absorb these cost differences? Can they pass them off to their customers if there's price elasticity in their market? Are they able to negotiate absorbing with or having some of it covered by the suppliers themselves? Are they going to have to reclassify their goods when they do the importation? So maybe under a different tariff code, they may not have as much of a impact to them. Or finally, do they have to build entirely new supply chains, nearshoring or whatever it may be? There are all of those factors to consider when you're doing business in kind of the global supply chain space.
Yeah, it reminds me because just in the last 4 years, we've seen so many changes. And I think part of it is asking yourself questions that you never thought that you would have to ask yourself before. I think for my speaking and consulting business, I never asked myself the question in February of 2020. Gee, I wonder what would happen if a worldwide pandemic shut down my business for 2 years. So I think it's looking ahead, like you said, as far as being able to pivot or being nimble, of just expecting the absolutely unexpected, because it has been a wild and bumpy ride the last 4 years. And you're looking at manufacturers are struggling with balancing cost, quality, speed. What are some of the strategies that you're seeing that they can optimize some of these factors?
So technology, in short, would be a really good way to start. There are unbelievable tools that exist to give you significant levels of visibility and transparency into so many different elements of your supply chain, which were not available 2, 3, 5, 10 years ago. And so that is with regards to levels of transportation and logistics, with regards to inventory management, so you can have reordering take place and having appropriate lead times, where you not only build in the time that it takes to manufacture and transit, but also, let's call it, another bucket called dummy time. And the reason why I would call that is because that's when you have holidays in the world that we don't celebrate. That's when you have these disruptions that you may not know or foresee happening, whether it's workers striking in ports or issues on the water or issues with transit, again, global wars, pandemics, political risks, any of these things. There's a lot of great planning and management tools and softwares that allow you to get visibility and transparency. Now, outside of that, there's also great tools that are allowing you to cut your development time. And that would be with regards to some of the ideation related tools, AI generated prototype ideations and things of that nature, where in the beginnings, if you wanted to make a new SKU or produce something, you'd have to go to an engineer and you'd have to basically sit with a designer for maybe a few months and try to do an entire rollout plan, where now we have tools with very minimal drivers and some reference points that can generate beautiful three-dimensional prototypes that you can print in a matter of a day or two and see physical, tangible goods that can then be mass-produced in lightning speed. So we're cutting down those periods of time, which saves you time on the back end. To be able to bring products to fruition and then to market, the time has been shortened by efficiencies on the front end, on the development side and the prototyping side. And then, as I said, through transparency, visibility, and trying to play chess by thinking 5 steps ahead, like we said, you're able to have a better, more resilient supply chain process.
Yeah, and you're looking at things, even with the technology for prototyping and the 3D printing, there may be 1 or 2 manufacturers out there with older equipment that, it's difficult to get parts for these days. And now with the ability to 3D print and stuff, it gives us so much more flexibility than having to, source things on eBay to find what we were looking for.
Absolutely.
And these are some of the things, and with you being involved globally, factory selection can really make or break a production plan. So what are some of the key considerations that manufacturers should prioritize when they're choosing their partners?
Absolutely. And again, I do speak a lot about this in my thought leadership and also in my book, as I mentioned before. And in short, what I would tell you is that you must weigh quantitative and qualitative factors when it comes to picking your right supplier. So on the qualitative side, it's going to be things like professionalism, timeliness, their levels of accountability, and looking at basically the dynamics of the relationship that you're going to have with this partner, because things aren't going to be smooth. As a matter of fact, anyone who states or says that you will never see a problem or ever have any defects, just run away as fast as you can.
Right.
It's not about not having defects, it's about managing them when they happen, and you have to plan for that. So that's the qualitative side. And on the quantitative side, it's years in business, number of accreditations, number of employees, level of exports to the nations that you may be operating in, so that they know how to interact with your transportation side or your government regulations or whatever it may be. And you do this balancing act where you look at, again, these quantitative and these qualitative factors to really hone in on the right partners. I won't say partners. And the reason for that is because of what we talked about before, which is always having a plan B, C, D, E, and F. You want to have a stock of great verified suppliers. Maybe you even want to do parallel production with 2 or 3 of them, because you want to know that if your one supplier is ever disrupted, that you're not out of business or you have other issues. So again, it's a matter of factory selection process and factories selection process, being plural, and then honing in on those 3 or 4 really good groups that have showed you their prototyping skills. Maybe you've done some test production runs with them, so that if you ever have a problem, you can be able to shift.
Really good point. And we've talked about technology already, but there's lots of other technology such as AI or SaaS platforms. So what are you seeing that manufacturers are using this for solving some of their supply chain challenges?
Sure. There's a lot of different challenges today, and I've been seeing some amazing technology with regards to, as we said before, the ideation phase, really cutting down the time for prototyping and development of products. That's really great. I think that there's wonderful technologies regarding transit routes, looking at the most effective transit routes on a minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour basis to be able to find the most effective pathway to get goods delivered. I believe on the inventory management side and delivery and fulfillment side, there's great technology to allow businesses to thrive even when they're not thinking about certain aspects of their business. And then I also believe that, and oh man, I can't believe it, I just lost my train of thought on the last one I was going to say. There was another one that was really great. Oh, I got it. There we go. Sometimes it just flies away and comes back. But the one I was going to say that I find really fascinating is with regards to right sizing and with regards to proper kind of cubing. And what I mean by that, for listeners who don't understand or know what that is that we all have had that experience where you get that delivery from Amazon and there's a really small thing inside of a really big box with a lot of airbags in it, right? A lot of wastage and so forth. There's some beautiful technology which is being implemented these days where boxes are being created in real time, on demand, on the production line as it scans different products. And it will literally produce a custom box for that product in a matter of seconds that will fit it perfectly, reduce wastage, which obviously helps with the carbon footprint related topics and sustainability, and reduces shipping cost and so forth. So this is fascinating to me, where we're moving away from mass production towards mass customization. And what's bridging that gap is AI. What's bridging that gap is much more advanced technology that's looking at multiple feeders. It's even anticipating what kind of products are like getting low in inventory, when you need to reorder, what's coming down the line before it even comes down the line, so it can get going on making these things before those things connect with that part of the process. So it's very fascinating what's happening there. And I think that's going to be real advantageous to businesses and more streamlined, efficient supply chains.
So that's really interesting with Amazon, because that thought has gone through my mind a lot when I get like a deck of cards in a crate, basically. So how would a company with as many products as Amazon customize the boxes to go along with it? Are you saying that they would have the technology to make the boxes there, or?
Correct. So one company that does a lot of this, just for your listeners to take a look at, is called Pack Size. and they do a significant amount of this kind of work. And there are many others too that are coming on the market also. But what would happen is there's basically a custom box manufacturing machine, which lives at, let's say, an Amazon fulfillment center. And as products come down a line to then be fulfilled by Amazon, picked and packed and so on, it scans the product and produces a custom box that matches to the dimension of that product. And in doing so, you essentially reduce shipping costs and waste and that unpleasant experience for customers who get that really big box with that really tiny thing inside of it. And the neat thing is that this plays into this idea of sustainability, and specifically sustainability in the supply chain. When we think of sustainability as business owners, one of the first things that comes to us in our mind is, oh boy, how much is it going to cost us? The interesting thing about this and other strategies which are being promoted through technology and AI are it's actually saving you money, a significant amount of money, because it's saving you on the packing materials themselves. Instead of paying for a box that's this big to ship an item that's this small, you're paying for a much smaller box that fits it appropriately. And it's saving on dimensions for shipping, for the shipping and transit sides. This has been proven, and I've seen many test cases where these kinds of strategies save businesses millions and millions of dollars, especially if they're in the business of shipping goods out every single day or week, and they're very reliant upon packing and shipping.
Wow, that's fascinating. That'll be really nice to see when it happens.
Yes.
So, how have you seen the shifting global market and supply chain disruptions changing the way manufacturers think about logistics and their risk management?
It's tough because the reality of it is that there is the disruptions that exist today in many ways are the same disruptions that have always existed. It just comes in a different format. And so suppliers, as well as the customers who rely upon global suppliers, need to consistently be, as we said before, nimble and ready to adapt and have alternative plans to essentially accommodate for such disruptions that they can plan for and those that they can't even envision happening, like a pandemic, right? It happens. I always believe that you want to build in the dummy time, as I said. If you are in a long-standing business that has some level of a good analysis around your sell-through, you may want to do some level of stockpiling, but not too significant that you take on major inventory risk. But in this way, maybe instead of ordering every 3 months, you know that there's going to be some changes in global events that are happening. Maybe your next order is a 6-month order, right? Just to be sure that if we're hearing some murmurs around something that's happening in a different part of the world or even within our own borders that could impact your ability to transit your goods, that you are okay because you've built up a little stockpile. Nothing that's going to put you out of business, but something that if you get disrupted for a quarter or half of a year or whatever, you're still in business. There's nothing worse than not having what you need and then you're out of business. And everybody's going to have to just apologize to all their clients. Some clients are going to say, I'll just go elsewhere. I can get what you don't have this other place. And that's just poor planning. That's just poor. It's easy enough to throw your hands in the air and say, not my fault. My manufacturer couldn't get it to me. So we lost customers and there's nothing we could do about it. Wrong. You knew that there were maybe events that were happening. You got to keep your ear to the ground as far as global events and then plan accordingly if you can.
Yeah, that starts to go into it. But what are some of the other biggest mistakes that manufacturers are making when they're scaling production?
When manufacturers are scaling or businesses are scaling?
Or businesses.
Right. So when businesses are scaling, one of the biggest mistakes is assuming that just because they're scaling, that all of a sudden their costs are going to get much better and that they're going to get volume discounts. The bigger misconception is to believe that if they push that envelope, that's not going to have some kind of a cost associated with it. When I say cost, let's say a reduction in quality, right? If you push your manufacturer so far and they've already given you a price point and you're in an area of commoditized goods where the margins are only so thin, the only way that a manufacturer is going to be able to accommodate those needs is by cutting some corners. And that happens in manufacturing all the time. And what does that mean? It means maybe they're going to seek out to use different materials. Maybe they're not going to keep some of those productions in-house anymore. Maybe they're going to put them with a warehouse or workshop. Maybe you're not going to have the same level of skilled labor that you've had before or the same level of laborers. Maybe your time frames are going to extend because you become less of a priority to them. The reality of it is that on some production lines, your ability to make 10 widgets and your ability to make 100 widgets is irrelevant to the manufacturer because it's just taking up time on the line. So obviously they hope that you're going to make 100 widgets instead of 10 widgets, but not if you're going to try to cut down their costs by 40 or 50%. Because then at that point, they say, hey, we like you as a client, but we either don't want to do business with you anymore because we are the world's manufacturer, not just your manufacturer. And the other side of it is, as I said, that you could face some really significant quality related issues where big disruptions happen because of the fact that in the process of scaling, you believed that you had some upper hand and could basically push the envelope with a trusted partner who says, you know what, I just don't need your business anyway.
Yeah, it reminds me of that triangle with quality, cost, and speed. And it's you can have any two you want, but yeah, at some point there's going to be a breaking point there. So good points.
Absolutely. Yes, it's true. It's true.
So from your experience, what does it take to build a resilient and agile supply chain that can withstand these unexpected challenges we've been discussing?
I really do believe that it comes down to thinking steps ahead, building a dependable plan, backup plans, plan B, C, D, however many you can have, looking at even alternative areas. And really, as I said before, when possible, being able to take on more goods than you think that you actually may need. When you do this business, you really can't rest on your laurels and believe that every production will be as good as the one before. In my business, we educate our teams and our QC inspectors to have the belief, a few beliefs, but one of the big ones is that the factory is always going to get it wrong because they want to cut corners and they're in the business of just getting the goods out as quick as they can. And that's a bit of a challenge in that way. And that also you need to protect the customer. And by protecting the customer, you have to work through an efficient and effective manner to really be able to manage these tangible and intangible risks so that they can get what they need when they need it. And finally, to believe that every production is the first time. This is a very important philosophy. Regardless of how many times you may have done a production in the past, you need to look at it as if it's the first time. You need to kick the tires in the same way because things may have changed, whether it's the materials, the person who's working the production line, the environmental conditions, whatever it may be. That production, even though you did it 100 times before, that 101st time that you do it is like the first time you've ever done. You have these mentalities of the best offense is a good defense, then that's where you really are able to build in resilience for your supply chains.
So as we're starting to get to the end of our time together, is there anything that I should have asked you or that you wish I asked you and I didn't, that we didn't cover yet?
Why am I crazy enough to work in this business? No, I think your questions were very spot on, honestly, and it's very timely. We're in a place and time right now where the supply chain has become common vernacular. People are understanding it. They are very interested in it, especially consumers, because it directly impacts their availability of goods and their costs, the costs of how they want to live their lives and raise their families and everything else. And so it's very important, timely subjects, and you asked some great questions.
Now, you mentioned at the beginning that you have a new book, so tell us about that.
Sure. I have a book. It's called my debut book. It's called Supply Chain Ups and Downs. It's available at supplychainupsanddowns.com. It's also on Amazon. And it's 147 pages, pretty concise, 13 chapters, and it's all about the trials and tribulations and kind of ups and downs of this industry. And I tried to write it in a way that was a very relatable voice and approachable subject matter, simply because of the fact that it's a complicated space. It's a complicated industry, and I wanted it to be a good read for students. So many students now are studying supply chain and productions operations management in college. I wanted it to be for consumers who want to understand why goods are skyrocketing or they don't have available products on the shelves, for business people who within their business, someone starts talking about, hey, you need to handle our supply chain, and they don't even know, they don't have a backbone of knowledge. And then even honestly for supply chain professionals who've been very siloed. When the supply chain, at least historically, if you were a shipping and transport person, you really didn't know much about the procurement side, or you may not know about the customs and duty side, or very little. So it's a holistic view about the space. And I talk about in the end of the chapter some interesting things such as AI and sustainability and nearshoring, which are topics that are very relevant today. But it's a good read, and I hope that it can benefit people from a good set of knowledge.
Okay, awesome. If somebody did want to get a hold of you and continue the conversation, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. I do a lot of my thought leadership on LinkedIn and YouTube and all those social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, all under my name, Karim Khafuri. Philosophy and leadership is what is the kind of the mantra over there, especially for supply chain. And my website is karimkhafuri.com. And outside of that, my business, which is the Atlas Network, is at theatlasnetwork.com, where we help businesses with global supply chain solutions and building their supply chains so that they're resilient and can be very dependable.
Karim, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Lisa. Thank you again.
I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network podcast. Do me a favor and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can grow this network and connect more fantastic folks just like you. You can either send your buddies to the website at manufacturers-network.com or share the Manufacturers Network podcast on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you and your industry friends hang out. The bigger and faster we grow the network, the stronger and deeper the community we'll all have. Thanks again, and I appreciate you.